movie is like going to a Gwar concert 30 years after they were at their peak. It's the best way I would describe it. So we are talking about Beyond Hell. This one written and directed by Alan Murray. Now, a very low-budget creature feature demonic movie with bags of ambition, but let's talk about what the plot. So it focuses on this group of college-age kids. I say college age, I think some of them may be a little older than this, but anyway. And they end up going to a particular party where one of the group has got his hands on this very kind of rare drug which comes from South America, all herbal, all natural, and it is said to expand the mind. And it certainly does. In fact, it sends one of the group into a demonic dimension where they come into contact with the Lord Demon of this dimension who wants passage into our world. And throughout the rest of the movie, it's these group of kids trying to overcome the obstacles that this demonic force is trying to do to try and get into our world and cutting a bloody swathe through these friends in the meantime. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, if I haven't said this already, it is a low-budget affair, so do not be expecting high production value or anything like that. Let's talk about the positives first of all. As I've kind of mentioned, this movie is very ambitious, obviously shot on a shoestring budget. You know, it has ideas bigger than really the budget can particularly afford, but it doesn't stop the movie from trying, as it does have quite a lot of kind of special effects. Now, they are a mix between practical effects and kind of CGI. Now, the CGI effects we'll come on to again, but I gotta say, I actually thought for the budget, the practical effects of the kind of the demonic creatures were quite fun. And I made the comparison to the band Gwar because they kind of remind me of those type of prosthetics, if that makes sense. They wouldn't be amiss at a Gwar concert, but I quite enjoyed them. And you know, for a low-budget affair, I think they've done a pretty good job, at least on some of the kind of the characters here. Now, yes, I'm sure people will point at least this effect doesn't look as good as this other film, which obviously had a higher budget, and I appreciate that. In comparison to a lot of other things, these effects do fall short, but for the budget, I think they do a good job here of making some very imaginative-looking demons. You know, and I quite enjoyed it because of that. The movie as well is relatively kind of fast-paced, going straight to the kind of the action, and with kind of, as I say, a lot of effects for a kind of a low-budget film, which clearly can't really afford to do them, but nonetheless, they have them there. I actually quite like one of the characters, I will say in particular, and this is the kind of like the stereotypical bad girl who is a little bit played against type here, who's giving a little bit more to do, and, you know, more of a kind of layered character than sometimes you'll get in these typical kind of mean girl sort of scenarios, and actually becomes more of a kind of a greater player and shows that these characters as well can have shades to them, kind of, you know, multiple kind of sides to this kind of stereotypical archetype here. However, let's talk about the way that maybe this falls down. So it kind of goes in tandem with what I've said. Although this movie does have ambition, it simply cannot afford to pull this kind of level of film off in a convincing way, and comes across as really buckling under its own weight in production value. So the movie's CGI effects look like they've just come from kind of some relatively cheap drag and drop effects and things like that, because they really do stand out as quite poor kind of CGI from maybe people who aren't really in the industry. You know, there's kind of these effects packages out there that do enable you to do these kind of effects, things like this, and you know, it's obviously for kind of beginners, so to speak. The acting, as you'd probably expect from such a low-budget film, these are not trained actors, or at least they don't appear to be, and the acting is particularly kind of cheesy. We've got one guy who is British trying to do an American accent, and his accent's coming in and out all the time. Some of the dialogue is as cheesy as you'd probably expect for a low budget, you know, schlocky movie delivered by actors who struggle with any kind of real emotional range here. So the acting is very cheesy, and we have some smaller characters as well, like the police detective. again, just super, super hammy. I think they could have been done. There's more that could have been done with the creatures themselves. So our main demon, I'll stand by and say I thought his prosthetics were quite good, but he's like constantly kind of has this silly demon laugh, which I just thought was like way overdone. And they've tried to make him like a character, but it just comes across as, Jesus, this is annoying. This is kind of silly now. And I think more could have been done to surround him in darkness a little bit, because, you know, you can kind of see through the cracks. As impressive as this low-budget attempt at prosthetics is, I think they would have been better maybe obscuring him slightly to really, you know, plus the effects a little bit more and not let it kind of seem so kind of like cheap in that respect. The story does have a bit of a twist, which I kind of appreciate, but it's nothing really that you kind of haven't sort of seen before. You know, so I've got to commend it to the filmmakers for having this vision of what they wanted to do, but it just seems they don't have the experience or the budget to kind of really follow through on, you know, a kind of a movie that I think at least some mainstream audiences would appreciate. And I got to say, even kind of lower budget, like B-movie fans, will kind of see this as a somewhat kind of rushed, sloppily put together production, which, you know, I think the way to go with those kind of style of movies is to have it try to kind of dial back on the CGI and lean into the gore, and that will at least have that kind of that hardcore horror audience on board there, which I don't think this movie really does. It maybe relied a little bit too much on the kind of the cheaper CGI effects, which look cheap, like cheap CGI effects, and didn't have a particularly huge amount of gore in it. It's also has this weird prologue in it, which seems completely out of place, which I have to be honest with you, reminded me of a horror version of the Power Rangers. And then it also has an epilogue, which again seems kind of out of place, although not as much as the beginning. That just seems to mean that they've added it on to plus the running time, maybe to set up a sequel, certainly for the latter, the epilogue. Overall, it's an ambitious hot mess of a film. I appreciate the attempt here, but I think the execution is just lacking that experience and kind of budget, as I've said. But if you're watching this, you're not going to care about that. You're not going to care that this is such a low-budget film. All you care about is what you are seeing. And I don't think that people would really appreciate this kind of like movie because it's so low budget. So I'll give it a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.